usually people don't, actually,
Yeah.
Which is kind of one of the reasons why I really appreciate. Yeah. Okay, great. And yeah, so what goes on? Okay, great. Go this here. Okay. So you can see here, there's a wide range of projects done in different countries around the world. Each of these projects are community-based public arts initiatives that are founded on communities coming together to make art for themselves and as permanent public monuments in their specific environments. This was a project that was done at the National Museum of the Diaspora, where 8,000 people participated doing a kilometer-long mural that was able to be completed in over 15 days, with participants coming every day. This was a project in Cuba, in Santiago de Cuba, at an international mural festival with local Cuban teenagers and artists from about 12 countries around the world. This is with the U.S. State Department, working with Israeli and Palestinian youth, as well as working in a series of Palestinian refugee camps. And this is working with an organization called AptArt, doing a series of murals on the Syrian-Jordanian border in a series of Syrian refugee camps that were specifically focusing on trauma relief through the arts. This was a project also working with Israeli and Palestinian youth that was permanently displayed at the U.S. Consulate General in Jerusalem, where any Israeli or Palestinian who needs to go for a visa or a passport will go through this building, and it's seen every day there in Jerusalem. This was working at the National Children's Hospital in Mexico City with children with terminal illnesses who were in intensive care units before they went into surgery and also after they had come out of surgery, specifically working with the cancer unit. And this was working with Israeli and Palestinian youth, specifically focusing on cross-cultural communication and how English literacy can be a part of that as well through teaching through the creative arts. This was another project with Syrian refugees with AptArt that was focusing on working in Zatri, which is the largest Syrian refugee camp in Jordan. And one of the main elements of this project was also taking this, cutting up the canvas we painted with children and families, and then being able to put it in an exhibition in Amman and in Brussels, and then be able to have all of the proceeds from those exhibitions going back to sustainable funding for more programming in the camps. And this was another project with the municipality of Jerusalem, working in one of the largest Palestinian refugee camps just on the other side of East Jerusalem. And all of these projects as a whole are part of the art evolution, like an evolution or a solution, or a revolution. And this concept is bringing all these different communities together in a form of communication through being able to express themselves as communities in public pieces of art, specifically focusing on murals. And the concept is how can people come together to make statements that reflect their relationship with the rest of the world, and how do they want to reflect their communities.
Hi, I'm Mary Ann Chacko, an editor of Cafe Dissensus, an online magazine, and also a doctoral student in Teachers College in the Department of Curriculum and Teaching at Teachers College, Columbia University. We are here at TC today. Teachers College is called TC. We are here at TC today, and we are in conversation with Max Levi Frieder, who is also a graduate student in the Art and Art Education department here at TC. Max is also an international artist and the co-founder of Art Illusion, which is a community-based public arts network which taps into the power of collaborative and participatory art making for creative empowerment. Thank you, Max, for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So my first question to you is, how did you, a young man from Colorado, become an artist activist who's such an ardent believer in the power of community-based art projects to heal and empower?
So I worked as the creative director at an arts camp in the Adirondacks in upstate New York. And I was able to do in a single summer over 25 mural projects with kids from around the world who were all at this very specialized creative arts camp. And after doing these large number of murals, I realized, wow, what if we took this concept and were able to implement it in places that have been disenfranchised, places that have not had the opportunity to be able to make art, especially with children and families. And I was able to then design this as a curriculum in my undergraduate degree at the Rhode Island School of Design, RISD, and I was able to do international field work while I was in my undergraduate with a focus on community-based public arts, and was able to work with Maori communities in New Zealand, with the indigenous communities there, and also in Costa Rica with indigenous communities there. So kind of through that process, that kind of opened up the doorways to realizing, wow, there really is a lot of potential for this to have an impact into people's lives.
And one of the things that you notice very quickly when you follow your work is your deliberate attempt to forge dialogue across differences. So can you give us a specific example of a project that really made you such a firm believer in the reconciliatory possibilities of collaborative public art?
I did a project, I guess it was about a year ago now, with the Parent Circle Families Forum. And this is an organization that works in Israel and Palestine with bereaved families, and specifically families who've lost their children and family members in war. And I was there during the last Gaza war, last summer, not this last summer, the summer before. And one of the experiences that I had with that was going into the West Bank, going into Palestine, and working with 25 bereaved Palestinian mothers who had all lost family members. And they had a very unique perspective, and through the process they were able to come together to paint half of a canvas. And the mural itself was about cross-cultural dialogue, and about, even if you've been hurt by the other side, even if you've had trauma, how can the arts be a way of having a conversation? And so we finished the first half of this with all religious Muslim Palestinian mothers, and then we rolled up the canvas and we brought it to the other side of the wall and brought it to Tel Aviv and worked with bereaved Israeli families who lost family members in the conflict. And they were able to finish the other half of the mural. And it was so successful that we actually were able to get permission from the Israeli government that the following week, 150 Palestinians, mainly women and families, were able to be brought over into Israel, into Tel Aviv, and were able to work with bereaved Israeli families. The final mural of the first project was then sent to America and was in an exhibition at the United Nations building. And it was really an act of kind of seeing the potential that the arts can have to be a medium of communication when very few other mediums can have communication, especially in areas where there's been conflict and trauma. And that can exist in all different kinds of ways. Israel and Palestine is one kind of example, but seeing that with Aboriginal communities in Australia and being able to have people from what they would call white fellow community and Aboriginal fellow communities, which are two different communities, coming together with arts is another way, let alone people who maybe have never been separated but never knew each other existed, whether that be in India and Peru, or whether that be in Syrian refugee camps and in Mexico. One of the elements of when you look at these projects is how can the arts be something that is universal? And kind of to be a common thread across humanity. And that's been one of the things that's kind of been astounding for me to see.
And I also read that arsonists tried to destroy that mural, and I think it also speaks to the power of that art that you tried to create with Palestinian and Jewish families.
Well, it was actually a very interesting situation. So the school that I worked in with the U.S. State Department was the only trilingual school in Jerusalem, the only school that has Palestinians and Israelis learning together in a single school. And about a month or two before I did a project there with the State Department, there was an arsonist attempt, and they burnt part of the school down. And so coming there to do this mural, even though it was a little bit after this, it was something that was also about kind of the resilience of the relationship between the children and families of these two different communities that have been so divided by history. And it really was an amazing experience for these kids to get to paint a mural on plexiglass, which was a different project, where this final mural is actually at the U.S. Consulate General to this day in Jerusalem.
It's amazing. And one of the things, like when you undertake this collaborative process, it's an extremely complex process, because it's not just people randomly coming together, but you actually facilitate a workshop where they come together, discuss issues that are pertinent to them, like decide on focusing on a particular issue, and also the mode of artistic production. So can you give us an insight into this complex process through another example then?
Definitely.
How do you
So it is a very complex process. It's a very multidisciplinary process. It's a process that is very step and layer oriented. So many times it starts with an invitation where an organization or a school or a library or a community center or an institution will invite myself, my co-director, and the work that we do to come and do a series of projects. But that's only the beginning. Then you have to write a proposal, being able to prepare the budget, being able to prepare all the materials, the transportation, the logistics, the accommodation, any of the kind of implementation methods that are needed. Then there's actually acquiring all the materials, and then actually going into the community and being able to do all of the educational and implementation-based parts of it is a whole nother side of it, of really working with the communities, working with the children, and really having that interpersonal contact. And then especially when it's facilitating dialogue between different groups, whether that be boys and girls of the same culture, or whether that be people of different cultures, that is a process that is very interaction-oriented.
Yeah.
Then, throughout this process, there's the documentation process of saying the photography, the videography, the written documentation. And then there's the final presentation of the mural to involve the community to see what they've created. And many times the goal is for a community to be able to see that maybe they had more talent than they thought that they had. And then after this has happened, then all that documentation is then published, is then put online, is distributed, is written about, and then there's a kind of analysis of it. And then hopefully the real goal of what I've been trying to implement, what we've been trying to implement, is how can you measure the social impact of this on an ongoing basis? What is the impact, and how can these kinds of initiatives be continued? And that's one of the big goals of the future of the Artolution, and what we are really growing kind of into is having people on the ground continuing to facilitate ongoing programming in different locations internationally.
To sustain these projects in a way, even after you come away from
Exactly.
it.
And very much, I mean, a big part of that is being able to have the actual process of creating the murals be a training process for some of the adults who are educators, artists, activists, and community organizers. And so to see that process and participate in that process, for that to be a training educational workshop, for them to be able to bring that into their own community on an ongoing basis. And that it can be something where it's not just people coming from other parts of the world to be able to facilitate a project, but that it can continue like a seed that can continue to grow into a tree.
And when I first contacted you, I was really excited to know that you're just about to leave for India, and now you've just got back from India.
I did.
So can you tell us a little bit about your project in Okhla, New Delhi, and also what was the kind of dialogue you were expecting to forge through that project?
Yes. So I was working with an organization called the Give a Hand Foundation, which is based out of Montreal, and they were in partnership with a second organization called the Kid Powered Media, and they specifically make documentaries with children in different areas of Okla and throughout Delhi. They specifically work in a community center called the Vidya Center, which is in Okla Phase 1 in a place called the Indira Camp. Indira Camp, like Indira Gandhi, was a camp that is in Okla Phase 1, which is part of Okla, which is the greater area of Phase 1, 2, and 3, which is the largest slum community in Delhi. And what we were doing there, with myself, Joel Bergner, my co-director, and his wife, CJ, what we were doing was a series of workshops painting murals, as well as building a large-scale percussion instrument out of trash and found objects that were collected by the local kids that we were working with, and being able to construct this together, paint all of these recycled materials, and then be able to turn it into a large-scale public interactive sculpture that was then had drumsticks attached to it with cable, where then it was able to be played by the children and the community. And alongside this, there was also theater and music and performance workshops that we were leading, as well as percussion workshops. All of this as a whole was called the Shanti Arts in Action program. And one of the primary elements of this was talking about issues that were very important to those communities. And how can you talk about these issues and then communicate the dialogues about this through the creative and expressive arts? What came of this is when we asked what are the most important issues to a community, one of the things they talked a lot about was safety for women and was about gender equality. And that was the whole, it was really a little over 2 week long workshop, and that was the whole first week was dedicated to that. So we talked about what does it mean to have healthy relationships between boys and girls? What does it mean to be able to get an education as a girl? And what does it mean as a boy to treat a girl in a positive way? And we had a lot of conversations about this, and there was a play that was created by the children about this, and music and dance, as well as the mural itself was about this. And all of the concepts were holistically created by the kids and painted and constructed by the children, which was an amazing opportunity, as well as to have the boys and the girls working together, which isn't always a common thing. And many of these children were Hindu as well as Muslim, and it was an opportunity for them to kind of come together to be able to talk about issues that were important to them. The second week, when we asked what's kind of a second partner kind of theme that's important to you, what they talked a lot about was the importance of children's rights, and specifically focusing on children's education and child labor, and the importance of kids to be able to go into school and not to be forced into child labor. And this was something we talked at length about and painted an entire mural about. And kind of in an overarching kind of scheme of this was also sustainability and being able to take trash, things that were discarded, and being able to actually transform the meaning of them into something that makes them special, to see that trash can actually become not just a sculpture, but can become a sculpture that creates music between the community. And it was something that we also involved a lot of local community adults. And we were able to involve children of many ages, starting at age 6, going all the way up to 17.
And now there's a lot of excitement here at TC about having you. And I hear that you're very actively involved in formalizing the community arts project undertaken by TC. So what are some of your hopes regarding that project?
So, to kind of answer that question, I'll give a little bit of an overview. So I am in the Education Doctorate program, the EDD program.
You're not a master's student.
I was in the master's program, but actually it was only about a week ago. It's kind of been formalized about the paperwork.
So that's a correction. I had said you're okay.
But I am getting an education master's as a seminal degree within the education doctorate degree. It's within art and art education with a specialization in community arts. So a lot of the work that I'm doing is actually innovating and helping the department to develop a curriculum for community arts within the doctoral program.
Oh.
This was really started actually right with the end of the project in India, where I flew directly from Delhi to Lima, to Peru. And I was working in a place called the Hogar de las Niñas, which is a girls' orphanage in a place called Región Callao, which is north of Lima, in the largest slum in Lima. And it's run by nuns, by Franciscan nuns. And this was organized by TC, as well as funded by Teachers College. And I was working in collaboration with two other education doctorate students, one of which was the founder of the Center for Art Education and Sustainability, and whose name is Ivan Asin. And the second is Tara Callan, who's the founder of the Aurelius for the Arts Foundation. And both of these partners, as well as Arlusha and the work I'm doing, we worked together to do a series of projects in this orphanage. And what we did there was doing a actually 6-story mural that was a giant colorful tree that was on the water tower in the middle of this huge kind of valley of large kind of barren mountains covered in houses that are all made of sheet metal and scrap wood and concrete, and it was this very large community where now to this day people from a kilometer around can see this piece, which was created by these girls. It was all by girls and myself and Yvonne, and one of the elements of that was we also built a found instrument there as well. And this was, had the nuns who were participating to help to collect all of these materials. And then there was also a follow-up project working in the jungle, doing a project in a place called Nueva Cajamarca. These projects are part of an international field research initiative, which is collecting different kinds of data on what are the impacts, what is the influences, and why is it important to have community-based public arts implemented on an international scale. And this is going along with a future publication that is going to be through the Art and Art Education Department here at Teachers College. That is going to have a cross-case analysis between India and Peru, as well as all the work in the Middle East that I've completed, in addition as part of a much larger kind of body of work dealing with Australasia and Australia and New Zealand, with Canada, across America, Mexico, Colombia, Cuba. And one of the elements of this is how can this create a model for implementation on a large scale and sustainable funding, and to be able to have this be able to expand the concept of how art and art education can be used for trauma relief, for conflict resolution, for community empowerment, and for social change. And what does that mean for research, and what does that mean directly for the people whose lives this is affecting?
And now that you're at TC, do you also have plans for the local community around TC?
I'm actually working right now as part of this larger initiative. So this is something that I think you'll find interesting. I did a project where I was working in Jackson Heights, Queens. Okay. This is one of the most diverse parts of the most diverse borough in New York, which is the most diverse city in America. So it's an incredibly diverse place. And I was working with kids from really many different countries all across the world. And we did a mural, we did a canvas mural. And it was with the intention of being an exchange mural with the kids in India, in Okla, and also with the kids in Lima. And so we did this big canvas mural, and we cut it in half. And half of it we rolled up and brought to India and presented as a gift to the kids in Okla, and the other half we brought to the kids in Lima. In the community center, in the Vidya Center in Okla, they hung this up, they bolted it into the wall, and we actually made another canvas there that was an exchange conversation with the kids in Jackson Heights. And the concept was also that we took video messages so that the kids in Jackson Heights were able to have video messages that were then shown to all the kids in India. The India kids were able to do a series of video messages. After we finished that canvas mural, we rolled it up and I flew to Lima. We brought it to the orphanage, unrolled it, and they actually finished the canvas collaboratively the kids in Peru with the kids in India, and they were shown the videos of the kids in India and the kids in Jackson Heights, and then they made their own series of videos. Then after this was completed, we rolled that up, brought it out back to the school, and I presented it actually only a couple of days ago to all of the kids, and it's now permanently displayed as a permanent gift, as a mural exchange program with the kids in PS 145. And the whole concept of that was being able to have an international dialogue where it's something that can tangibly be seen, felt, and expressed by kids in different sides of the world who may never get to talk to each other, who may have never even met somebody from that country. They now have an opportunity to be in conversation. This has continued through Teachers College and work I'm doing now, where I'm actually continuing work in that same school, doing a series of, doing a Foundsterman project, where we're collecting trash and recycled materials from here in New York, and we're actually building a public percussion instrument in Queens currently. And one of the big goals is we're also planning a large series of projects for next semester in the Bronx, working at in a place called Allerton in the East Bronx, doing a series of projects in one of the local community gardens, which was recently begun, doing another series of public sculptures through recycled materials and percussion instruments, as well as doing a local mural there as well.
And most of I also understand this also entails a lot of costs in terms of paint, and so who has been funding you usually? Are these NGOs who?
Well, that's a great question, and that's one of the most ironically important questions outside of the actual content itself is, how does this function? How do you create a project where the financial element of it can really facilitate the interactions of the community? So the Artolution and the work that I've been doing has been for about 7 years, has been in action, and we've been working with over 70 different international NGOs, governmental organizations, humanitarian aid organizations, schools, libraries, private donors, social corporate social responsibility, and social innovation. And all of these different kind of funding mechanisms have really been through partnerships and through partnership funding. The recent project was with Teachers College. The one at Okla was through the Give a Hand Foundation. But really, in addition to all of these partners, is actually part of the reason that I'm here at Teachers College is kind of establishing Artolution and evolving it from being an international network into being an international organization which can be able to acquire its own funding as well as partnership funding. And that's been one of the fascinating processes of evolving the work that we've been doing into something that can really have a sustainable funding platform.
Yeah, and I guess that's also why the measurableness of it becomes important when you're reaching out to others and speaking about your projects to others.
Exactly.
Because I'm sure you are convinced about its impact, but when you talk to a third person, they might want to know, how do you measure the impact?
And that's a great question. Measuring social impact is a really difficult question, especially when you're talking about the arts, because it's not something where you can have quantitative research the same way you can with English literacy. It's something that's it's a much more person-to-person relationship-based kind of block of data. And so because of that, what that's beginning to mean is finding ways of measuring that. And that's one of the things that's been very helpful here at Teachers College, where I've had the opportunity to be able to create a survey and send it out to communities around the world, asking what has been the impact in the last 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years. Being able to create a series of observational research where you can take written documentation, videography, and photography and say, how does this show the stories as well as interviews? And then being able to put that into written form where it can really be described and really illuminate some of the intricacies of this very complex field, which really requires so many different kinds of expertise. And when you really start to look at it, it's something that is not always so straightforward. And the implications and the impacts can be very deep-rooted, but can be difficult to see. And at other times it can be very visual to see, but can be difficult to measure. And so because of that, it's kind of this amazing, almost catch-22 of finding out ways of showing the impact. And every time you find a new way, you realize that there's so much more that needs to be shown. Yeah. I will say working in India was very, very eye-opening. I never had experiences like I did with India. And I think the reason why is the people that were there, and especially in this community where you have a lot of people who, the idea of getting a college education, the idea of being able to leave your community is very difficult. And at the same time, I looked at the joy that these children had. It was something remarkable. And one of the elements that was so touching, I'd say for me, was, in all these communities, I've worked in about 17 countries internationally, and one of the elements that was unique in India specifically was that at the end of the performance, and the end of the fountain performance, and the mural presentation, to be able to have, it was probably, we worked with over 200 kids, but to be able to have these kids come up to say goodbye, and being able to have 10, 15 boys specifically surrounding me, ages 8 all the way up to 16, teenage boys, teenagers, in a group hug who were all crying, saying goodbye. And that openness, that embracement of this experience was something that was a very, very significant part, I think, for me, as well as being able to see some of these kids just thrive when they hadn't had the opportunity to do things that this shared opportunity to do. And one of the elements, if I can paint a little picture, is you can imagine me with 30 kids walking down the street in Okla with all kinds of cows and all kinds of kind of chaos around, and us all holding this trash, right? Random buckets and cans and things we got at the Kibativala, at the local trash dump, and have them all, and randomly we all start banging on them as we're walking through the street and start singing. And it turns into this parade where all of a sudden this music and this dance and percussion flooding the streets, and you have hundreds of people all staring at these kids saying, what are they doing with this random gun? And being able to have this kind of come back, and when we start attaching it together, being able to have some of the girls, these religious Hindu girls, using drills, using wire cutters, using these sculptural materials where they never had the opportunity to do that before. It was something that was amazing to see, the excitement and the engagement that was able to inspire.
So Max, it's been an amazing journey to have you with us. Thank you very much for your time and for opening the world for us in a very new way. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And I will say that if you're interested in seeing any more information about this, you can see it on the website at Artolution, ARTOLUTION, artolution.org. And as well as feel free to be in contact and to get involved, because this is something that is really growing and is hoping to be able to innovate the field of community arts for the future of the world.
All the best to you.
All the best to you. Thank you very much.